Welcome to this week's episode of Yes Labels. Bill Stepien here, joined by Justin Clark, as always. Make sure to like, subscribe, comment, and share the podcast with your friends. Justin, we are less than 1 week away from the first Republican presidential primary debate, so it makes sense to dive into that and do an official, obligatory debate preview show. You okay with that?
Debate preview show. I love it.
We will talk about what's happening right now, in each candidate's campaign headquarters, how they're preparing, what they need to do on the stage next week, how we think it's going to go, the whole thing. So why don't we get into that, Justin, if you're okay with it?
Sounds good.
I think we should start by talking about each of the candidates who we think has made the debate stage, fulfill the requirements to be able to get on that stage. And it probably makes the most sense to talk about Donald Trump.
I think that's right. He's the obvious front runner coming into this debate. And of all the candidates, I think he's got the simplest thing that he needs to do headed into this debate, and that is not show up. As you said on last week's podcast, our numbers from South Carolina, but it's going to be applicable everywhere. There is no upside to him showing up at this debate stage. It brings himself down to everybody else's level, filled with peril. It's unnecessary. He's going to be the news coming out of the debate anyway, and he shouldn't show up.
People forget, and I obviously totally agree, as we talked about last week, people forget that he skipped debates in 2016, right? And I think it turned out pretty okay for him last time around in 2016. So as we know, he plays by his own rules. He writes his own rules. Conventional wisdom, previously would be that you can't skip a debate. You need to be there. He writes his own rules. He's got his own playbook, and I couldn't agree with him more.
The next one's Ron DeSantis, right? I mean, Governor DeSantis probably has the most at stake in this debate, and he's also, as opposed to Trump, who has the easiest strategy, I think, has the most difficult one. He needs to somehow, and we've been saying this for weeks now, months now, somehow make news about himself and why he's running for president on this debate stage. It's a really hard time to do it on a debate stage because he's going to have 5, 6, 7 other people on there all gunning for him too. He's in second place. He's going to be, of the people on the stage, the person with the largest vote share. And they all kind of smell blood because of the several months of difficulties he's had. So he needs to somehow make news to who he is, what he's doing, why he's running for president, something he hasn't been able to do yet. Make news and keep himself in that second place spot, for lack of a better term, or rather leader of the field that's out there, or else he could really nosedive more than he already has. It could be really perilous for him if he's not able to do that. What do you think of that, Bill? What do you think he needs to do?
I couldn't agree more. Pressure is extremely high on Governor DeSantis. No one needs to hit a home run more than Ron DeSantis next week. And the problem is he's not a good debater, right? Check out his deer in headlights moment from his last campaign when he looked awkward and uncomfortable when Charlie Crist asked him a very simple question about whether he would fulfill his next term if elected.
A question he had to know was coming. If you're going to prep for one question in the 2022 debate, if you're Ron DeSantis, that's one he should have been able to knock out of the park. Easy.
Another point, this leaked memo that was publicized on a website and then pulled down when the New York Times saw the memo outlining step by step, word by word, what Ron DeSantis needs to do next week is a disaster. As someone who sat in the campaign manager's chair, I would be livid right now that I'm being forced to react to this. It is the job of a super PAC to be in the shadows, to be unnoticed, and let the candidate shine. This is a major unforced error by the super PAC 1 week from the debate, and it only increases pressure on the guy who already had the most pressure of anyone on that stage. Now the pressure is even higher. I mean, the memo says things like, tell a story about your family showing emotion. Like, there are going to be all sorts of Ron DeSantis drinking games during the debate. Like, Take a sip of beer if he talks about the family vacation to the Outer Banks. Finish your beer if he tears up while telling it. Like the
Yeah.
biggest the biggest issue is that at a time when voters are demanding that their candidates, that their leaders look and be authentic and real, this paints him as someone who looks fake and scripted.
And Bill, I couldn't agree more. I want to talk about the super PAC in a second, but let's just take your example, which is tell a story about your family. If he actually goes on the debate stage and tells a story about his family, and it's very detailed and it's moving and it's great and it's a really good emotional answer, guess what happens now? The press asks him or his campaign, hey, Governor DeSantis, did you tell that story because you read it in this memo from the super PAC? Or is it like really moving for you? It completely dismantles any actual good answer he gives on any of those topics, and just is going to make everybody second guess every answer he gives, making him feel like he got told what to do by his super PAC. I want to get back to your super PAC comment for a second, because that was embarrassing, that memo leak. It was completely embarrassing. It was a terrible idea. Here's the thing you mentioned, which is really sticking in my craw a little bit. Super PACs are supposed to stay in the shadows and support a candidate. This super PAC obviously put itself out there yesterday with this memo leak. But they've been doing that this whole time. They're making themselves the news story. At the Iowa State Fair the other day, some staffers from the super PAC got into a fight with Trump supporters at a bar. What? Like, what are you doing? And it wasn't even Trump staffers or Trump super PAC staffers. It was just random Trump supporters at a bar. It's embarrassing, putting yourself out there and making yourself the news as opposed to letting the candidate shine. And they've really kneecapped his chances in this debate, and not only set expectations up for him, but any great performance is going to be second guessed if it at all hints at what was put in that memo. It was a disaster. You said it, disaster.
Yeah, it shows Ron DeSantis to be a pull string doll, right? Telling him what exact words to say, word for word, how to show emotion. It's really just a disaster.
And reinforces a lot of the criticisms of him, which is he's plastic, a little bit weird, a little too scripted. All those things that are negatives on him anyway, it really reinforces it. Just terrible. Just terrible.
Tim Scott, what do you think?
Tim Scott, in most accounts, is in third place. Because of this memo leak, though, he's kind of able to do what he's been doing, which I think is a really good strategy, which is just be there. He's got to show up. He's a good speaker, good debater. He does a great job on these types of things. I'm going to look at it from a different view about what he needs to do to say what he needs to not do. Tim Scott needs to not melt away into the background. Bill, you probably remember 2016, that first debate. Scott Walker, who had a lot of enthusiasm behind him early on, got a lot of criticism for not inserting himself enough in the debate and not kind of taking up space on the debate stage. Not jumping into questions, not jumping into the fray. I think Tim Scott's doing a good job right now of creating himself as an alternative for people to go vote for, especially in Iowa. If I'm him, though, I'm worried that kind of hanging around be a bad look on the debate stage. And he needs to, I don't know if throw a few elbows is the right word, but he needs to insert himself. He needs some takeaway lines. And there needs to be stories written about him about how he engaged in a debate and did a good job. That's kind of what I'm thinking for Senator Scott.
Yeah, I think there are two things that I look for in debates, right? One is expectation setting. Do you exceed or underperform expectations? And I always think back to the 2004 Bush-Kerry debate, where the Bush campaign did a masterful job of talking about what a great debater John Kerry was. I think someone said he's a better debater than Cicero. Obviously trying to lower expectations for their own guy, who wasn't the most skilled debater, obviously. Do you exceed or underperform expectations? And can you set yourself apart on the stage? Usually in debate settings like this, there are a bunch of boring U.S. senators on the stage. Tim Scott's the only U.S. senator on the stage. which I think is pretty rare in settings like this. And what do you do as a senator? You make a lot of speeches. So I think he's kind of made for this moment, not just because he's got natural skill at it, but it's kind of what he does for a living. I think this is the chance for him to continue his momentum. He's been showing slow but steady movement in the polls every week, every month. There's really, really good growth from Senator Scott. So I think this is a chance next week, an opportunity for him to continue that.
Yep, I agree with that. Why don't we stay in South Carolina and talk about former Ambassador Nikki Haley? What do you think? What do you think she needs to do on the stage?
She's got to stop the bleeding, first of all. I don't think, and I've said this before about Ron DeSantis, I believe it about Nikki Haley too. I don't think she's really done a good enough job telling people why she wants to be president. She's had a really hard time breaking through. I think this is a chance for her to be on stage and really create a course correction, because for the last 3 months, as her own polling has shown, in her home state, she's gone down, 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 and down every single month.
I agree. Her speaking style, she shows flashes of being combative, right? We've seen it over time. There are Iowa State Fair shirts around there about not underestimating her, and that's all great. But then when she's out there and she's doing a debate, she kind of has a slower cadence. She's not inserting herself much in there. She needs to recapture kind of the Nikki Haley from 2010, which was the Tea Party candidate for governor in South Carolina. She showed a lot of energy, showed a lot of passion. Get back to that instead of kind of this ambassadorial speaking style. But you're right, man. She's got to do something, because this is not going well for her. Pulling out of that trajectory is going to be difficult, compared with Tim Scott, who we just talked about, who set himself up as a person who can be an alternative where there's no expectation. She's got to fix this. She's got to fix it fast, because it's going in the wrong direction for her, and it needs to change. She's going to remain on the next debate stage or thereafter. What do you want to talk about next, Bill? Let's talk about Vivek Ramaswamy. What do you think about old Vivek?
I think most voters don't know what a Vivek Ramaswamy is yet. Those who do like what they see. And I think this is a chance to introduce himself to a wider audience. And I think he will benefit from being anywhere and everywhere on TV. If there's an interview to do, he does it. I think that practice, because this is a lot of practice. How good are you at this? Debating is a skill. I think that practice is going to benefit him well, as someone who has a lot of confidence, has a lot of swagger. And I think that's going to benefit him next week when he speaks to a wide audience for the first time.
So I agree. I think there are some risks here for him, though. He has done a great job of getting out there and making news, being in the news. He's like rapping at the Iowa State Fair, which was, I'll be honest, a little cringy, but fine. He's making news. He's getting out there for a large audience of people that don't know him. Two things that I think he runs the risk of. He is a fast talker, and he says a lot of stuff. And sometimes, as we've seen in the last couple of weeks, some of the things, like his 9/11 comments, are a little off key and a little off tone. Those things are on a much bigger stage here, and can get amplified in a way that might not be good for him. He just talks. He talks a lot. He says a lot of stuff. The other thing is he's very young. So that fast speaking style, that talking a lot, that youthfulness, he's got to make sure he doesn't get caught in a trap with some really good debaters on this stage. And we're going to get to two of them in a minute, where he gets caught in a trap and gets made to look like a little kid, gets kind of slapped down by somebody, because it'll impact him more than it'll impact a lot of others. And on a stage where he's introducing himself to everybody, that can't happen. It's a real risk he's got. And if I were him or his camp, I'd be worried about it, because there's some pretty good debaters on that stage. And I think we should jump into one of them right now. Isn't a lot of sizzle, but is really a lot of stake on the debate stage, and that's Mike Pence. What do you think? What do you think Vice President Pence needs to do, Bill?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think he's a statesman. He comes across as a statesman, which can come across as boring. I think he needs to show some fire and some passion, because you have some really, really interesting people up on the stage, and coming across as boring or plodding, and approaching the debate more like a tactician as opposed to really for what it is, it's entertainment. I think that's one thing that he's got to have in the back of his mind.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. He is going to over prepare for this probably, but is very good at this type of thing. Again, not a lot of flash, not a lot of sizzle. But if the debate turns to statesman-like things or questions that are relevant to him, he's going to answer them well, and he'll engage in an appropriate way with others on the stage. That style, though, as you and I both know, you don't control your own destiny with it. You're kind of at the will of where the conversation goes. But he needs to be Mike Pence in terms of his debate style, and then hopefully the conversation gets there for him. Let's talk for a minute about Governor Chris Christie. I think he is obviously the exact opposite style. I mean, he's got a lot of substance and he's well versed on the issues, and he's a talker. I mean, his most probably well-known debate performance was when he put on a suicide vest and took out Marco Rubio in 2016. I think we all know his abilities. We all know his strengths on the debate stage. I actually think here, I'll give a specific thing about what he needs to do. I think he needs to try to take out Ron DeSantis. I say that because it's pretty clear to me that he's taken the vote share that he's gotten and is increasing over the last several polls is coming directly from Ron DeSantis, from Governor DeSantis. And Governor Christie needs to take that and take more of it and make himself as that. Ron DeSantis's vote share, which has declined over time, was built in at least part by people who wanted to see an alternative to Donald Trump. Chris Christie is clearly running on that provision for that group of voters. He needs to take out Ron DeSantis and grab that group of voters. Now, we've talked before about him. He's got a huge vote consideration problem with Republicans, TBD whether that's possible, but that's what he needs to try to do in this debate. What do you think, Bill?
His cup is full of never Trump voters, right? And it's that capacity. He needs to find new avenues and new votes. I think DeSantis is one. We also know from our own polling in South Carolina, Justin, that he and Nikki Haley drink from the same faucet. So I think
that's right.
Nikki Haley is another place he can go. I think you got to be careful, being too aggressive on the only female on stage. He's got to be more than a trained assassin next week. Ended Marco Rubio's 2016 campaign on that debate stage in about 10 minutes in New Hampshire. To me, he's like the bearded lady at a carnival. Everyone is obsessively curious as to what he's going to do, what trick he's going to, use this time around. And everyone thinks he's just going to go after Trump. I think the smart play is for him to go after DeSantis and to go after Haley in the right way.
Yeah, if anyone makes this debate about Trump and really goes after him, and I'm sure there will be questions about it. Martha McCallum's already said there will be questions about it. But anyone that really goes hard after Trump and makes Trump the issue loses this debate.
Yeah, everyone thinks Christie's
Donald Trump.
We know from that ridiculous memo that was leaked by Team DeSantis, they expect Christie to spend his time going after Donald Trump. Chris Christie does a really good job of keeping people on their toes and surprising people. He needs to be going after Ron DeSantis. He needs to be going after Nikki Haley.
Totally agree.
One more name, Justin.
One more person.
Yeah.
One more name. Who you got, Bill?
Burgum?
Doug Burgum. Governor of North Dakota, Doug Burgum, got himself on the debate stage with, I'm going to say, a really smart way of hitting the RNC's thresholds with respect to donors, giving away $20 Walmart or Amazon gift cards in exchange for a $1 donation. Really smart. Got him on the debate stage. I don't know what his strategy should be other than you got yourself here. Let's see what you got. And that's kind of where I am. What do you think, Bill?
Yeah, there's not much more to say. He made it, and maybe making it is good enough. Simply being on the stage is a big deal, as you note. Appreciate the creativity in getting there. What he does, how he does it, what his goals are. I'm not even gonna begin to think about that.
Yeah, I'm with you. Well, so these candidates are all obviously getting ready for the debate in some form or fashion. We've seen a few articles about preparing it. We actually, as you mentioned, saw a pretty detailed internal memo from the DeSantis super PAC about what they think he should be doing. I'm sure they're all practicing. There's no right way or wrong way to do debate prep. Bill, you and I have done this a lot over the years with people, and there really is no right or wrong way. There's different styles people have and different things they want to do. when I prepared for stuff, I'd do it in a different way than you would or others would. Why don't you talk for a minute? You were pretty deeply involved in the 2020 presidential debate prep with former President Trump. Why don't you talk for a minute, kind of about what let people know kind of what happened in that room. I think it might provide a little insight on what's gonna be coming up ahead of next week.
Well, at this point, 6 days out from the debate, you should mostly be obsessing over which tie you're going to wear. At this point, if you're training for a marathon, you shouldn't be running 20 miles 3 days before the race. By now, you should be prepared. You should know what you want to do. In the last week, you should be getting rest, scaling back your schedule, making last minute tweaks. The more you're focused on the debate right now, the worse off you are. And by the way, the fact that Santis, as we saw in that memo, is as focused as he is being told in such detail this late in the game what to do, how to do it, how to look when doing it. That's pretty concerning to me, because at this point in the game, it's really late. You shouldn't be thinking about any of those things. You should have been thinking about all those things 3 months ago, not 6 days before the debate. Debate prep is all about making a candidate feel comfortable and feel prepared. 2020 debate prep with Donald Trump was unlike any debate prep I had ever seen before or been a part of before. The things that you would often do with a candidate, you wouldn't even think about doing with Donald Trump, right? There was no Joe Biden stand-in. There was no standing on a podium. There was no mock setup of the debate stage. There was none of that. It was a couple people in a room with him, firing questions away at him. Me, Jason Miller, Stephen Miller, Hope Hicks, Kellyanne Conway, Chris Christie. That was it. It was not a big room. It was not overfilled with people. I mean, in fact, one of our challenges was trying to keep people out of the room, and specifically, Giuliani kept trying to get through security to get into the room because he wanted to be a part of it. We knew he would be a complete distraction. He actually made it into one of the sessions, and he completely hijacked the meeting, spent all this time trying to get Trump to talk about Hunter Biden and laptops and leaked emails and hard drives, stuff that was a complete distraction. But really,
where's Hunter?
Where's Hunter? What we did in debate prep that worked for Donald Trump was a little bit of a refresher from 2016. We showed him clips from the Clinton debates, showed him hitting the right notes, highlights, just to refresh his memory of what worked, what he did last time. And look, he had more media experience than probably any candidate or any president in history, right? So there's no need to talk about how to look into the camera, when to smile. He's been doing all that since, the 80s. Really what we focused on in 2020 was reminding him of what he did as president, because it's easy to forget, when you're late in 2020, the things he did early in 2017, or what the cabinet agencies did, some of their accomplishments, some of their achievements. So we focused most on making sure he had solid recall on the good stuff that he accomplished. Didn't spend any time on the polish or when to smile, when to look at the camera. There was no Joe Biden stand-in. It was really mainly focused on the substance, the policy, making sure he had solid recall down so that he could flip to his memory Rolodex when asked a question about, the good things he did on taxes or the good things he did on immigration. That's what we focused on.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. I think what you said at the top is correct. Like, getting somebody comfortable 6 days out from a debate is probably more important than actually, jumping in and delving into a new policy area. And you bring up a good point. It's just different for everybody. You had a candidate, we had a candidate that was, again, really experienced with television and media, who had debated quite a bit. And really, just like you said, there's so much going on in a White House. You need to be reminded of kind of what happened. I'm always, you don't have control over what happens in a debate every once in a while, but sometimes you just roll in, over prepared. And I'm reminded of, Bill, I don't know if you remember this one. It was a Republican presidential primary debate in January of 2016. And Ted Cruz was really ripping into to Donald Trump, and the issue had come up about how Ted Cruz was born in Canada. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah.
But he had clearly prepared for this debate because Donald Trump had been attacking him on it about how he was born in Canada. Ted Cruz gave a very eloquent, very detailed, and pretty compelling case about how he, under federal law, he was a U.S. citizen at birth. I think there's no question about it, but he gave a very compelling answer, a very detailed answer, a very long answer about how he was a U.S. citizen and qualified to be president of the U.S. Constitution. And Donald Trump rebutted it in a very short way, challenged that. And Ted Cruz went back and went through the whole explanation again. And I just remember thinking, okay, this guy really prepared. He's really got this answer down. And a lot of the news commentators said he hit a home run because he explained everything really well. And all I could think of was he spent 8 to 9 minutes of a televised debate on CNN or whatever it was, talking about how he was born in Canada. And it ended up being a terrible thing for him because they spent 10 minutes talking about how he wasn't born in the United States, which is not something you want to talk about on a debate stage. So your comment about being too prepared, and not being too prepared, but overdoing it, I imagine in their debate prep room in 2016, they came up with that detailed answer. They ripped through it. They debated over it. They came up with a great answer, and it was the wrong thing to do. And that one always sticks out in my mind because it seemed crazy to me that you're talking about being born in another country for 8 minutes on the stage. It's just one that always stuck out, and things don't always go as you think they're going to. And sometimes you can over prepare and prepare too late.
Good points. And, all things that I think we'll be looking at next week. Look, I'm sure we're going to all watch the debate next week. And just like we had this obligatory debate preview show, I wouldn't be shocked if we had the obligatory debate recap show next week. So look forward to that. As always, Justin, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, and share the podcast with your friends. Thanks for joining us, and we'll talk to everyone next week.
Later, everybody.